Why alien mercenaries declined to fight. Human Special Forces. The metal corridors of Station Nexus 7 hummed with activity as alien merchants. Traders and mercenaries moved through the massive structure. The station floated in the void between three star systems, making it the perfect neutral ground for business that other worlds might find questionable. Commander Vex Thari walked through the crowd with purpose, his forearms swinging naturally as his hooves clicked against the deck plating. The Kithran was impressive by any standard. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and curved horns, he commanded respect wherever he went. The Deathclaw's patch on his shoulder told everyone exactly who they were dealing with. His mercenary company had earned its reputation the hard way, through 3 decades of successful contracts across the galaxy. Behind him walked his 2 lieutenants, Korath and Zem. Both were younger Kithrans, eager to prove themselves worthy of the Deathclaw's name. They had been excited when the meeting request came in from the Hegemony Council. Everyone knew the council paid well for quality work. The meeting room was located in the station's business sector, where important deals were made away from prying eyes. Vex Thari entered first, his keen eyes taking in the details. The room was simple but clean, with a long table in the center and chairs designed to accommodate various alien body types. 3 representatives from the Hegemony Council were already waiting. Vex Thari recognized the species but not the individuals. The lead representative was a Zerinian, tall and thin with blue skin and large black eyes. The other 2 were shorter, stockier beings from the Mechlon Collective, their mechanical implants gleaming under the room's lights. Commander Vex Thari, the Zerinian said, rising from his seat. Thank you for coming. I am Council Representative Thexmore. These are my associates, Engineers Krull and Voss. Vex Thari nodded and took his seat across from them. His lieutenants flanked him, their hands resting casually near their weapons. It was not meant as a threat, simply good practice when dealing with new clients. You come with strong recommendations, Thexmore continued. The Deathclaws have an impressive record. 17 major contracts completed successfully with minimal losses and maximum efficiency. We do our job, Vex Thari replied simply. What kind of work do you need done? Thexmore activated a small holographic projector in the center of the table. The image showed a star map with several systems highlighted in red. The hegemony has been expanding into the Outer Rim territories. For the most part, resistance has been minimal. However, we have encountered a problem. The image shifted to show a planet covered in forests and mountains. This is Kepler 442b, a mining world we claimed 6 months ago. The local government surrendered without a fight, as expected. But since then, our operations have been constantly disrupted. Vex Thari leaned forward, studying the tactical information as it appeared. Insurgents? Of a sort? Krull spoke for the first time, his mechanical voice carrying a note of frustration. A small unit of human soldiers. They call themselves Special Forces. The room fell silent. Vex Thari's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture. Korath and Zem exchanged glances, not understanding the sudden tension. How many? Vex Thari asked quietly. Our intelligence suggests no more than 12 individuals, Voss replied. They have no air support, no heavy weapons, and no reinforcements. Yet they have cost us millions of credits in damaged equipment and delayed operations. Thexmore waved his hand, and the hologram showed a series of incident reports. They strike without warning, hit multiple targets simultaneously, then vanish completely. Our security forces cannot predict their movements or counter their tactics. We have tried negotiating, Krull added. We offered the humans generous terms to leave peacefully. They refused. So we need them eliminated, Thexmore concluded, completely and permanently. No survivors, no witnesses. The hologram displayed a contract offer that made Korath gasp. The amount was staggering, enough to fund a mercenary company for years. It was the kind of payday that mercenaries dreamed about. Vex Thari stared at the numbers for a long moment. His lieutenants watched him eagerly, probably already planning how to spend their shares. The hegemony representatives waited patiently, confident that no mercenary could refuse such an offer. No, Vex Thari said finally. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Korath and Zem stared at their commander in shock. The hegemony representatives looked confused as if they had not heard correctly. I'm sorry, Thexmore said. Did you say no? The Deathclaws decline this contract, Vex Thari stated clearly. He stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. But the payment, Korath started to say. Vex Thari silenced him with a look. The meeting is over. Thexmore rose as well, his confusion turning to anger. Commander, perhaps you did not understand the full scope of the offer. We are prepared to double the amount if necessary. Triple it, Vexithari replied without hesitation. Make it 10 times the original offer. The answer remains no. Engineer Voss's mechanical parts whirred as he processed this response. This is illogical. You are a mercenary. We offer payment for services. There must be a price that interests you. Vexithari moved toward the door, his lieutenants hurrying to follow. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at the bewildered hegemony representatives. Find someone else, he said. There are plenty of mercenary companies in the galaxy. The Draconian Siege Corps has a good reputation. The Hive Mind Collective is always looking for work. The Plasma Wraiths enjoy a challenge. And if they refuse as well? Thexmore demanded. Vexthari's scarred face showed something that might have been sympathy. Then perhaps you should consider why experienced warriors would walk away from easy money. The door sealed behind them as they left. Korath and Zem remained silent until they were well away from the business sector, their minds struggling to understand what had just happened. Commander, Zem finally spoke. I don't understand. That was more money than we've made in the last 5 years combined. For 12 humans with no support, Korath added. We have 200 fighters. We have gunships and artillery. How could 12 humans possibly threaten us? Vexithari stopped walking and turned to face his young lieutenants. They had served with him for several years, but they were still learning what it meant to be a mercenary. More importantly, they were learning what it meant to survive in a galaxy full of dangers. Tell me, he said slowly, what do you know about human special forces? Both lieutenants shrugged. Zam spoke first. They're soldiers like any others. Humans are a young species. They only joined the galactic community a few years ago. What could they possibly do that we haven't seen before? Vexithari looked at them for a long moment, then shook his head. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. He led them deeper into the station, toward the cantina section where off-duty mercenaries gathered to drink and share stories. Most of the tales told in such places were exaggerated, but sometimes you could find truth in the details. As they walked, Vexthari spoke quietly. Credits mean nothing to the dead, young ones. And I have no intention of leading my people into a grave for any amount of money. The cantina was crowded and noisy, filled with dozens of different species all trying to drink away memories of their latest contracts. Vexthari scanned the room until he found what he was looking for. In a corner booth sat a lone figure, drinking something that glowed faintly blue. The being was clearly draconian, but something was wrong. His scales were dull, his posture defeated. Most telling of all, he bore no company insignia. There, Vexthari pointed. That is Captain Zeph Ironscale. Until recently, he commanded the Draconian Siege Corps. Korath frowned. What happened to him? Vexthari's expression was grim. He met human special forces. Why alien mercenaries declined to fight human special forces? Captain Zeph Ironscale had once been the pride of the Draconian military. His scales had gleamed like polished emeralds, and his voice had commanded instant obedience from hundreds of warriors. Now he sat alone in the darkest corner of the cantina, staring into his drink as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Vexthari approached the table slowly, his lieutenants following behind. The Ketheran commander had known Ironscale for years, had even fought alongside him on several occasions. They were not friends exactly, but they shared the mutual respect that came from facing death together. Zeph, Vexithari said quietly. The Draconian looked up, his yellow eyes dull and unfocused. It took him a moment to recognize who was speaking to him. When he did, he gestured weakly to the empty seats around the table. Vexithari, Ironscale said, his voice hoarse. Come to see the famous failure? The mighty captain who lost an entire company to a handful of primitives? Korath and Zem exchanged uncertain glances. They had heard rumors about what happened to the Siege Corps, but seeing their former commander like this was shocking. Ironscale had always been larger than life, a warrior's warrior. Tell me what happened, Vexithari said simply. Ironscale laughed, but there was no humor in it. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I learned that everything we thought we knew about warfare was wrong. He took a long drink, then began to speak. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he remembered. 3 years ago, I received a contract from the Colonial Development Corporation. Simple job, they said. A human mining colony on Kepler 442b was refusing to relocate. The CDC wanted them gone, but they needed it to look like an accident. Vexthari nodded. Such contracts were common in the Outer Rim, where corporate interests often clashed with stubborn colonists. The intelligence reports made it sound easy, Ironscale continued. 200 human civilians, mostly miners and their families. No military installations, no orbital defenses. The plan was to make it look like a mining accident that got out of control. But there were soldiers there, Sim said. 12 of them, Ironscale confirmed. The reports mentioned a small security detail, but they were described as local militia. Nothing that should have concerned professional warriors. The Draconian's eyes grew distant as he remembered arriving at the planet. The Siege Corps had come in 3 assault ships, expecting to complete the mission in a matter of hours. They had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. We deployed at dawn, Ironscale said. Standard assault formation. I sent squads to secure the main settlement while keeping reserves ready for any unexpected resistance. Everything went according to plan for exactly 7 minutes. He paused to drink again, his hand trembling more noticeably. The first indication that something was wrong came when Alpha Squad stopped responding to communications. They had been tasked with securing the mining complex on the eastern ridge. When I tried to contact them, all I got was static. Korath leaned forward. Equipment malfunction? That's what I thought, Ironscale replied. I sent Beta Squad to investigate. They found Alpha Squad's vehicles abandoned at the bottom of a ravine. The bodies were never recovered. Fexithari said nothing, but his expression was thoughtful. Experienced soldiers did not simply vanish even during surprise attacks. I should have withdrawn then, Ironscale continued. Should have recognized that we were dealing with something beyond our experience. Instead, I sent more troops. The pattern had repeated itself throughout the day. Draconian squads would advance into seemingly empty areas, then disappear completely. Sometimes their equipment would be found days later, rigged with explosive traps that killed anyone who tried to investigate. Sometimes there was no trace of them at all. By midday, I had lost 60 warriors, Ironscale said. 60 of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, gone without ever seeing their enemy. My remaining forces were starting to panic, jumping at shadows and firing at empty trees. Zem shook his head in disbelief. How could 12 humans do that to trained soldiers? Because they weren't fighting like soldiers, Ironscale replied. They were fighting like hunters, and we were the prey. The real terror had begun when the humans started their psychological warfare. They would leave messages for the Draconians to find, written in perfect Draconian script. The messages contained detailed information about individual soldiers, their names, their homeworlds, their families. They knew things they should not have known, Ironscale whispered. Private communications between my officers, supply schedules that were classified, personal details about warriors who had never set foot on that planet before. Fexithari frowned. How? We never figured that out, Ironscale admitted. But the effect was devastating. My soldiers started to believe the humans could read their minds, predict their every move. Fear spread through the ranks like a disease. The psychological pressure had been combined with increasingly bold physical attacks. The humans would strike at supply convoys, communication arrays, and command posts with surgical precision. They seemed to know exactly when and where to hit for maximum effect. They turned our own technology against us, Ironscale continued. Captured weapons, stolen vehicles, hacked communication systems. Every advantage we had became a weapon in their hands. Korath was struggling to understand. But you had air support, didn't you? Orbital bombardment. They took out our air support on the second day, Ironscale said bitterly. Somehow got past all our security and planted explosives in the fighter bays. Lost 6 gunships and their crews before we even knew what happened. The ground campaign had deteriorated into a nightmare of constant ambushes and disappearing patrols. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once, striking without warning and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. On the 4th day, they started leaving trophies, Ironscale said, his voice barely above a whisper, weapons and armor arranged in patterns that could be seen from orbit. They were sending us a message. What message? Fexithari asked. That they could have killed us all at any time. They were playing with us, studying us, learning everything they could about how we fought. We weren't enemies to them. We were test subjects. The final blow had come on the 5th day, when the humans launched a coordinated assault on the Draconian command center. They had used captured equipment and stolen codes to bypass every security measure. They walked right through our defenses like they owned the place, Ironscale remembered. When I finally saw them face to face, I was shocked. They were so small, so fragile looking. Without their armor, any one of my warriors could have broken them in half. But size and strength had not mattered. The humans had moved through the command center with deadly efficiency, neutralizing threats and gathering intelligence before disappearing back into the wilderness. I found myself alone in my own command post, Ironscale said. My entire staff was unconscious or dead. The humans had taken everything: our battle plans, our communication codes, our personnel files. But they left me alive. Zem looked confused. Why? To deliver a message, Ironscale replied. One of them spoke to me before they left. He was young, maybe 20 of their years. He said they knew about the real mission, about the plan to make the colonists disappear. He said if we left immediately and never came back, they would let us go. The Siege Corps had withdrawn that same day, their mission a complete failure. Of the 200 warriors who had landed on Kepler 442b, only 37 had made it back to their ships. The rest were either dead or missing. The CDC refused to pay us, Ironscale concluded, said we had failed to complete our contract. My own people blamed me for the disaster. I was stripped of command and discharged from the service. Vexthari sat in silence for a moment, processing what he had heard. The story seemed impossible, yet he knew Ironscale was not lying. The broken warrior before him was proof enough of that. How? Korath asked finally. How did they do it? Ironscale looked at the young Kithaeron with something that might have been pity. That's the wrong question, boy. The question you should be asking is why they let any of us live at all. He finished his drink and stood to leave, his movements slow and careful like those of a much older being. I've spent 3 years trying to understand what happened on that planet, he said. I've studied every battle report, analyzed every piece of data, and I've reached one conclusion. Those weren't just soldiers. They were something else entirely. As Ironscale walked away, Vexthari turned to his lieutenants. Both young warriors looked shaken by what they had heard. Now do you understand why I refused the contract? He asked. Korath nodded slowly, but Zem still looked uncertain. Commander, surely that was just one battle. Maybe Ironscale made mistakes, or maybe those particular humans got lucky. Vexthari stood and headed for the cantina's exit. Come, he said. There are other stories you need to hear. Why alien mercenaries declined to fight. Human Special Forces word traveled fast in the mercenary community. By the time Vexthari and his lieutenants left the cantina, news of the Hegemony Council's rejected contract was already spreading through Station Nexus 7. In the bars, trading posts, and meeting rooms, conversations turned to the same topic: Human Special Forces. The next morning, Vexthari received 3 separate messages. Each one was from a different mercenary commander, each one asking the same questions. Had he really turned down a council contract? Was it true that the job involved fighting humans? And most importantly, what did he know that they did not? Korath found his commander in the Deathclaw's temporary headquarters, a small suite of rooms rented by the month. Vexthari was reviewing intelligence reports on a holographic display, cross-referencing incidents and looking for patterns. Sir, Korath said hesitantly, Commander Voskar of the Hive Mind Collective wants to meet with you. He says it's urgent. Vexthari looked up from his work. The collective was one of the most feared organizations in the galaxy, a group of insectoid warriors who shared a telepathic link that made them nearly unstoppable in combat. If Voskar wanted to talk, the matter was serious indeed. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room deep within the station. When Vexthari arrived, he found not just Voskar but several other prominent mercenary leaders. The crystalline being known as Prism of the Vorthak Commerce Guild was there, along with Shadewalker Nyx of the Plasma Wraiths. Even Captain Steelheart of the Meccano Legion had made the journey. Vexthari, Voskar spoke for the group, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones of the collective's shared consciousness. We need to talk. The Kithaeron took his seat, noting the unusual tension in the room. These were beings who had carved out fearsome reputations across the galaxy, yet they all seemed troubled. I assume this is about the Hegemony contract, Vexthari said. Prism's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating deep concern. The council approached us after you refused. They offered the same terms, then double when we hesitated. And? Vexthari asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We declined as well, Shadewalker Nyx replied, her energy form flickering with agitation, as did Captain Steelheart and his mechanical warriors. Voskar leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the room's lights. We need to share information. All of us have encountered human special forces. All of us have paid a price for that encounter. The stories that followed painted a picture that was both consistent and terrifying. Each mercenary company had faced human special forces under different circumstances, on different worlds, with different objectives. Yet the results were always the same: professional warriors reduced to broken survivors, their confidence shattered and their companies destroyed. Prism spoke first. his crystalline voice resonating through the room. The Vorthak encountered them 18 months ago on Rigel Prime. We had been hired to protect a weapons depot from local insurgents. The humans were advising the rebels. The Vorthak were known for their ability to analyze thousands of variables simultaneously, their crystalline brains processing information faster than most organic species could think. They could predict enemy movements with mathematical precision, making them nearly unbeatable in tactical situations. There were only 8 of them, Prism continued. 8 humans against 200 of our finest strategists. We calculated every possible move they could make, prepared countermeasures for every scenario. But the humans had not followed any predictable pattern. Instead of fighting like conventional soldiers, they had adapted their tactics in real time, creating new strategies that the Vorthak's calculations could not account for. They did things that were mathematically impossible, Prism said, his form shifting to deep purple. They would attack from directions that our analysis proved were inaccessible. They would coordinate movements without any detectable communication. By the end of the first day, our strategic algorithms were generating error messages. The humans had systematically destroyed the Vorthak's analytical advantages, feeding them false information and creating scenarios that overloaded their processing capabilities. They had turned the Vorthak's greatest strength into a weakness. We lost 60% of our forces before we realized what was happening, Prism concluded. The survivors barely escaped with their lives. Boss Carr's turn came next, and his account was even more disturbing. The Hive Mind Collective operated through a telepathic network that connected every member, allowing them to function as a single coordinated organism. They could execute complex maneuvers without verbal commands and respond to threats with perfect synchronization. We encountered them on Europa Station, Voskar said. A simple extraction mission. We were hired to retrieve a corporate executive who had been taken prisoner by pirates. The humans were part of the rescue operation. The collective had expected an easy victory. Their telepathic coordination gave them an overwhelming advantage in close combat, while their ability to share sensory information made ambushes nearly impossible. But something went wrong, Voskar continued. Our network began experiencing interference almost immediately. At first, we thought it was equipment malfunction. But the pattern was too consistent. The humans had somehow learned to disrupt the collective's telepathic communications, using techniques that should not have been possible for a non-psychic species. They had isolated individual members of the collective, cutting them off from the network and leaving them vulnerable. By the end of the engagement, our hive mind was fractured, Voskar said, his voice carrying undertones of pain. Half of our warriors were suffering from psychic trauma. The network has never fully recovered. Captain Steelheart's account was more direct but no less shocking. The Meccano Legion consisted of cybernetically enhanced warriors, who had replaced most of their organic parts with military-grade machinery. They were stronger, faster, and more durable than most organic soldiers, with built-in weapons and armor that made them living tanks. We met them on the industrial world of Tartarus, Steelheart said, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion. Corporate war between 2 mining conglomerates. The humans were hired as military advisors for the smaller company. The Legion had expected a straightforward battle of attrition. Their enhanced soldiers could absorb enormous amounts of damage while dealing out devastating attacks. They had faced similar opponents before and always emerged victorious. The humans studied us for 3 days before engaging, Steelheart continued. When they finally attacked, they seemed to know exactly how our enhancements worked. They targeted specific components, exploited design flaws we didn't even know existed. The humans had used electromagnetic weapons to disrupt the Legion's cybernetic systems. They had employed acid compounds that corroded specific types of armor plating. Most disturbingly, they had somehow obtained detailed technical specifications for the Legion's equipment. They turned our own augmentations against us, Steelheart concluded. Warriors who had been modified for optimal performance became liabilities. The more enhanced a soldier was, the more vulnerable he became to their attacks. Shadewalker Nyx's story was perhaps the most unsettling of all. The plasma wraiths were energy beings who could phase in and out of physical reality at will. They were virtually immune to conventional weapons and could pass through solid matter like ghosts. We encountered them on the moon of Phobos 3, Nyx said, her form flickering between visible and invisible. The humans were defending a research facility that our employers wanted destroyed. The wraiths had considered the mission routine. What could solid matter beings do against enemies who could become incorporeal at will? They had phased through the facility's defenses, expecting to complete their objectives within hours. But the humans were ready for us, Nyx continued. They had prepared countermeasures specifically designed to affect energy-based life forms. Magnetic fields, electromagnetic pulses, resonance frequencies that disrupted our molecular cohesion. The humans had forced the wraiths to remain in physical form, then attacked them with weapons designed to exploit their energy-based biology. They had used techniques that were theoretically impossible, turning scientific principles into weapons with deadly efficiency. Half of our number were dispersed permanently, Nix said, her voice filled with grief. The survivors fled, but the damage was done. We learned that no advantage is absolute when facing human special forces. When the last story was finished, the room fell silent. Each commander sat lost in their own thoughts, remembering defeats that had once seemed impossible. They're not just soldiers, Voskar said finally. There's something else, something we don't understand. Prism's crystalline form had turned a deep black, indicating maximum analytical confusion. Our species have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We understand tactics, strategy, logistics, but these humans operate by rules we cannot comprehend. Captain Steelheart's mechanical components whirred as he processed the information. Pattern analysis indicates a common factor: adaptive capability beyond normal parameters. They study their opponents, then develop countermeasures in real time. More than that, Shadewalker Nix added. Why alien mercenaries declined to fight. Human special forces deep in the Andromeda sector, far from the politics and power struggles of the galactic core, Strike Team Omega prepared for their next mission. The Human Special Forces unit operated from a modified cargo ship called the Defiance, a vessel that looked unremarkable from the outside, but contained some of the most advanced military technology Earth had to offer. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood in the briefing room, studying tactical displays while her team assembled around the central table. At 42, she was considered old for special operations work, but her experience was irreplaceable. She had led Omega through 17 successful missions, each one more challenging than the last. Gather round, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from years of commanding elite soldiers. We've got a new job. The team members took their seats, each one representing years of training and battlefield experience. Corporal James Tank Morrison was the heavy weapons specialist, a mountain of a man who could carry equipment that would break most people's backs. Sergeant Lisa Chen handled electronics and communications, her small frame hiding a genius-level intellect for technology. Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos was the team's medic and demolitions expert, a combination that often seemed contradictory until you saw him work. Private Sarah Kim was their sniper, capable of making impossible shots under the worst conditions. Sergeant David Park specialized in infiltration and close-quarters combat, while Corporal Angela Foster was their pilot and vehicle specialist. The rest of the team filled other specialized roles: intelligence gathering, language interpretation, psychological operations, and advanced reconnaissance. Each member had been selected not just for their individual skills but for how they worked together as a unit. Intel shows we're heading to the Vega system, Vasquez continued, activating the holographic display. Corporate extraction mission. Zenith Industries has a research facility on Vega Prime that's been overrun by pirates. They want their people back and their data secured. The display showed a detailed map of the facility, along with intelligence estimates about the pirate forces. Tank whistled softly as he studied the numbers. 50 pirates, maybe more, he said. They've got the place locked down tight with heavy weapons and defensive positions. Standard smash and grab? Chen asked, already analyzing the facility's electronic systems. Negative, Vasquez replied. This needs to be surgical. The pirates have threatened to execute the hostages if they detect any rescue attempt. We go in quiet, extract the targets, and disappear before anyone knows we were there. Santos raised his hand. What about opposition intel? Do we know what species we're dealing with? Vasquez pulled up additional files on the display. Mixed group, Catherine heavy infantry, Draconian assault troops, and some Vorthak tech specialists. Professional mercenaries, not your typical pirates. The team exchanged knowing looks. They had faced all these species before and understood their capabilities. Each alien race brought specific advantages to combat, but they also had weaknesses that could be exploited with the right approach. The Catharans will rely on their size and strength, Park observed. They'll set up defensive positions and wait for us to come to them. Draconians are more aggressive, Kim added. They'll want to control the high ground and use their natural climbing abilities to gain tactical advantage. And the Vorthak will try to outthink us, Chen concluded. They'll have analyzed every possible approach and prepared countermeasures. Vasquez nodded approvingly. Her team understood their opponents, which was the first step toward defeating them. But understanding was only the beginning. "Foster, what's our insertion looking like?" she asked. The pilot activated her own display, showing approach vectors and defensive positions. "Facility's got good coverage on all conventional approaches. But there's an asteroid field about 10 kilometers out that could provide concealment. I can get us close enough for a zero-G insertion." "How close?" Santos wanted to know. 2 kilometers. Maybe less if we're willing to risk detection. Vasquez considered the options. A spacewalk insertion would be dangerous, but it would also be unexpected. Most ground-based defenders never thought to watch for attacks from above. "Equipment check," she ordered. "We're going in light and fast. Personal weapons only, no heavy gear." Tank looked disappointed but nodded. Heavy weapons were his specialty, but sometimes the mission required finesse over firepower. As the team prepared their equipment, Vasquez reviewed the intelligence files one more time. Something about this mission felt different, though she could not put her finger on what. The pirates were too well organized, their defensive positions too professional. It felt less like a simple raid and more like a military operation. "Sergeant Chen," she called, "run a deep scan on those pirate comm frequencies. I want to know who they're talking to and what they're saying." Chen's fingers flew over her console as she accessed the ship's advanced listening equipment. The Defiance carried electronic warfare systems that were years ahead of anything the pirates were likely to have. "Interesting," Chen said after a few minutes. "They're using military-grade encryption, and the communication pattern suggests they're reporting to someone off-world." "Corporate rivals?" Park suggested. "Possible," Vasquez replied. "Or something more complicated. Keep monitoring. I want to know if anything changes." The team spent the next several hours in preparation. Each member checked and rechecked their equipment, studied the facility layout, and rehearsed their assigned roles. They had worked together long enough to function almost telepathically, each person anticipating what the others needed. Santos prepared medical supplies and small explosive charges, carefully balancing the two aspects of his role. Kim assembled her sniper rifle, a custom weapon that could fire various types of ammunition depending on the target. Tank selected a lighter loadout than usual, but still managed to carry enough firepower to support the entire team. As they worked, they talked. Not about the mission, but about home, about families, about plans for after their service ended. It was a ritual that helped maintain their humanity in a job that often required them to do inhuman things. "My sister's getting married next month," Kim mentioned while cleaning her rifle. "She wants me to walk her down the aisle since Dad's not around anymore. You going to make it back in time?" Foster asked. "That's the plan. This is supposed to be our last mission before rotation home." Tank laughed. "Famous last words, Kim. How many times have we heard that one?" "This time is different," Kim insisted. Colonel Martinez promised. 6 months Earth leave minimum. Vasquez listened to the conversation while reviewing tactical options. She understood the importance of these moments, the human connections that kept her people grounded. In a galaxy full of alien species with incomprehensible motivations, it was easy to lose sight of what they were fighting for. 2 hours to insertion point, Foster announced from the cockpit. The team began their final preparations. Combat suits were checked and sealed. Weapons were loaded and secured, communication systems were tested and synchronized. Each person went through their personal pre-mission rituals, the small habits that helped manage stress and maintain focus. Vasquez gathered them for a final briefing. "Remember, we're not trying to win a war here. We get in, get the hostages, get the data, and get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Everyone goes home." The team nodded in understanding. They had heard variations of this speech before every mission, but it never lost its meaning. Their job was not to prove anything or make statements. Their job was to complete the mission and survive. "Chen, what's the latest on those communications?" Vasquez asked. "Still encrypted, but I'm picking up increased activity. Whatever's happening in there, they're getting nervous about something." Santos frowned. "Think they know we're coming?" "Possible," Vasquez admitted. "Or they could be worried about their employers. Professional mercenaries don't like being left in the dark." As the Defiance approached the insertion point, the team made their final equipment checks. Each person carried enough supplies for 72 hours of independent operation, along with specialized gear for their individual roles. 1 minute to insertion, Foster called. Vasquez looked at her team one last time. They were young mostly, with Chen being the youngest at 24, and Tank the oldest at 31 besides herself. They had volunteered for this work, knowing the risks and accepting the responsibilities. What the galaxy's mercenaries feared in human special forces was not superhuman abilities or advanced technology. It was something much simpler and much more dangerous. The willingness to adapt, to learn, to sacrifice everything for the mission and for each other. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy, or the smartest or the most technologically advanced, but they were human, and that meant they would never stop fighting until the job was done. Go time, Vasquez said quietly. The airlock opened, and Strike Team Omega disappeared into the void, 12 small figures against the backdrop of stars. They moved with practiced efficiency, their suits' thrusters providing precise control as they navigated toward their target. Behind them, the Defiance faded into the asteroid field, leaving no trace of its presence. Why alien mercenaries declined to fight human special forces? 6 months after the failed hegemony contract, Vexithari sat in his private office aboard the Deathclaw's flagship, reading reports that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. The holographic display showed shipping schedules, contract listings, and employment opportunities throughout the galaxy. What it did not show were the traditional mercenary jobs that had once been the backbone of his business. The galactic mercenary market was collapsing. It had started slowly, with individual companies refusing contracts that involved human special forces, but word had spread quickly through the underground networks that connected mercenaries across known space. Stories were shared, warnings were passed along, and patterns began to emerge that painted a clear picture. Humans were not just another client species. Korath entered the office carrying another batch of reports. The young Kitharan had matured considerably over the past months, his eager enthusiasm replaced by thoughtful caution. The Rigelian Commerce Guild just posted a new contract, he said, placing the datapad on Vexthari's desk. Escort duty for a mining convoy in the Outer Rim. Standard rates, minimal risk. Vexithari glanced at the contract details without much interest. Escort missions paid poorly and offered little opportunity for advancement. A year ago, the Deathclaws would never have considered such work. Accept it, he said finally. We need the income. Korath nodded and made the necessary arrangements. As he worked, he spoke carefully. Commander, I've been monitoring the general channels. There's something you should know. Go ahead. The Terran Federation has officially entered the galactic military contracts market. They're offering their special forces units to the highest bidders. Vexithari looked up sharply. This was the development he had been expecting but dreading. If humans were now competing directly with traditional mercenaries, the implications were staggering. Show me, he commanded. Korath activated the holographic display, bringing up a series of announcements from the Galactic Commerce Authority. The official language was diplomatic and polite, but the message was clear. Earth's military was open for business. The contract terms were revolutionary. Human special forces units would accept missions that other mercenaries considered impossible. They offered completion guarantees that bordered on arrogance. Most importantly, their success rate was documented and verified by independent observers. 97% mission success rate, Korath read aloud. Average completion time 40% faster than industry standard. 0 contract violations or civilian casualties. Vexithari studied the numbers with growing concern. These statistics represented a level of professionalism that put traditional mercenaries to shame. If they were accurate, humans would quickly dominate the market. What are the major companies saying about this? He asked. Panic mostly, Korath replied. The Siege Corps has disbanded completely. Captain Ironscale finally gave up trying to rebuild after what happened on Kepler 442b. The Hivemind Collective is restricting operations to their home systems. Even the plasma wraiths are being more selective about which contracts they accept. The intercom system activated, and Zem's voice filled the office. Commander, we're receiving a priority communication from Station Nexus 7. It's Commander Voskar of the Collective. Put him through, Vexthari ordered. The holographic display shifted to show Voskar's insectoid features. The Collective commander looked even more troubled than usual, his multifaceted eyes reflecting deep concern. Vexthari, Voskar said without preamble. Have you seen the latest contract postings? The human announcements? Yes, we just reviewed them. Not those, Voskar replied. The new jobs being posted by major corporations and governments. They're specifically requesting human special forces units. They're paying premium rates for services that we used to provide. Vexithari felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. How many contracts? 17 in the past week. And that's just what we know about. The humans are being selective, only accepting missions that showcase their capabilities. Korath brought up the contract listings that Voskar was referencing. Each one represented work that would normally have gone to established mercenary companies. The clients were offering extraordinary compensation for human services, apparently willing to pay any price for guaranteed results. It gets worse, Vossakar continued. The Hegemony Council finally found someone willing to take their contract on Kepler 442b. The Thanagarian Deathwings accepted the job. Vex Thari knew the Deathwings by reputation. They were a newer company, founded by young warriors who had not yet learned the hard lessons that came with experience. Their eagerness to prove themselves often led them to accept contracts that wiser mercenaries avoided. "When do they deploy?" he asked. "They're already there," Voskar replied grimly. "Have been for 3 days. All communication stopped yesterday. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the Deathwings had met the same fate as other mercenaries who faced human special forces, it would be the final nail in the coffin of traditional mercenary operations. "I'm calling an emergency meeting," Vossakar said. "All the major commanders. We need to discuss our response to this situation." The meeting took place 12 hours later in the same conference room, where the commanders had first shared their encounters with human special forces. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of sharing war stories, they were discussing survival. The assembled mercenary leaders represented the finest military companies in the galaxy. They commanded thousands of warriors, controlled fleets of ships, and had access to advanced technology that could level cities. Yet they sat around the table like refugees from a disaster, struggling to understand how their entire industry had been made obsolete. "The mathematics are clear," Prism announced, his crystalline form shifting through various analytical configurations. "At current rates of client preference shift, traditional mercenary operations will be financially unviable within 2 standard years." Captain Steelheart's mechanical components whirred as he processed the data. "Alternative employment options are limited. Corporate security positions offer reduced compensation and minimal advancement opportunity." Shadewalker Nix flickered in and out of visibility as she spoke. "Some of our people are talking about retirement. Others want to form smaller, specialized units that might avoid direct competition with human forces. Running away won't solve the problem," Vossakar stated firmly. "The humans are expanding their operations. Eventually, they'll dominate every sector of military contracting." Vexithari had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now he stood and activated the room's main display. Instead of showing tactical information or financial projections, the screen displayed a simple communication interface. "What are you doing?" Prism asked. "Something that should have been done months ago," Vexithari replied. He began composing a message, his words appearing on the screen for all to see. "To Terran Federation Military Command. From Commander Vex Thari, Deathclaw's Mercenary Company. Subject: Request for meeting. The Galactic Mercenary Community formally requests a diplomatic meeting to discuss mutual interests and potential cooperation opportunities. We acknowledge the superior capabilities of human special forces and wish to explore possibilities for partnership rather than competition." He paused, looking around the room at the other commanders. "Are you all willing to sign this?" The question hung in the air for several moments. What Vexithari was proposing represented a fundamental shift in how mercenaries had operated for centuries. Instead of competing with each other for contracts, he was suggesting they subordinate themselves to human leadership. "You're talking about surrender," Steelheart observed. "I'm talking about adaptation," Vexithari corrected. "The humans have proven they can defeat us militarily, but perhaps they need allies who understand the galaxy better than they do." Prism's form shifted to a thoughtful amber color. "Analysis suggests potential benefits to such arrangement. Human tactical superiority combined with our strategic knowledge and local contacts could create optimal operational efficiency." One by one, the commanders added their signatures to the message. Some did so reluctantly, others with genuine interest. All of them understood that the alternative was extinction. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours, Vexthari received a reply from Earth. To Commander Vexthari. From General Sarah Chen, Terran Federation Special Operations Command Subject. Request for meeting. Your message was forwarded to my office. I appreciate your direct approach to this situation. A meeting can be arranged at Station Nexus 7 within the week. Please be advised that any partnership discussions will require full disclosure of capabilities, resources, and operational history. We look forward to productive negotiations. 3 days later, Vexthari found himself in the same conference room where he had once refused the hegemony contract. But this time, he was the one seeking employment. General Chen arrived with a small escort of human officers, all of them wearing the understated uniforms that marked them as special operations personnel. She was younger than Vexithari had expected, probably in her 40s, with graying hair and the calm confidence that came from years of successful leadership.